Arthur, IT guy at a mid-sized company that makes, well, let's just say we make specialized components. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. Or it was. For about 5 years, my job was pretty straightforward. Keep the servers running, troubleshoot network issues, tell people to turn their computers off and on again. The usual stuff. The company was like that too. Predictable. We had our rhythm. You knew who to talk to if something broke. If one of the CNC machines on the floor went down, you didn't file a ticket. You went and found Darren. Darren was the head of maintenance and operations. Looked like he was carved out of oak, probably in his late 50s, hands like leather, and could diagnose an engine knock from 2 rooms away. He never said much, grunted more than he spoke, but he knew that building and everything in it better than the architects who designed it. I remember one time, the main AC for the server room failed in the middle of July. Temps started climbing fast. I was sweating bullets, looking at a potential meltdown of our entire infrastructure. The fancy third-party repair company we had a contract with said they could have a guy out in maybe 4 hours. I was about to start shutting down non-essential systems when Darren just appeared in the doorway. He didn't say a word, just walked over to the giant whining unit, listened to it for a solid minute, eyes closed. Then he walked over to a wall panel, opened it, and flipped a single unmarked breaker off and then on again. The unit sputtered and roared back to life. He looked at me, grunted something that sounded like, "Appreciate it," and walked away. That was Darren. He didn't work by the book. He worked by an encyclopedic knowledge he kept entirely in his head. Then there was Khari. Khari ran the warehouse and logistics. To an outsider, his warehouse looked like pure chaos. Boxes here, pallets there, no clear rhyme or reason. But it was a system. His system. He knew where every single one of the thousands of component types was, down to the shelf and bin number, just by memory. A customer would place a massively complex order with a dozen different parts, and Khari would glide through the aisles like he was on a wire, collecting everything in minutes. He'd designed the whole workflow himself over a decade. It was unconventional, but terrifyingly efficient. We were a well-oiled, if slightly rusty machine. Everyone had their role, and we respected each other's expertise. I didn't need to know how Darren fixed the AC, and he didn't need to know how I configured the firewall. Things just worked. Then, sometime last spring, the CEO called an all-hands meeting. He was a typical corporate suit, a bit spineless, always chasing the latest business trend. He announced that we were lucky to have a new hire joining us to bring our company culture into the 21st century. Standing next to him was Emerson. She was our new HR director. She was exactly what you'd picture. Late 30s, expensive-looking blazer, a smile that was perfectly practiced and didn't involve her eyes at all. She stepped up to the podium and gave a speech. It was a masterpiece of corporate nothingness, full of words like synergy, paradigm shift, holistic approach, and fostering inclusivity. I zoned out about halfway through, but the key takeaway was that things were going to change. Most of us just shrugged. We'd seen VPs and directors come and go. We figured we'd just keep our heads down and wait for her to get bored and move on to some other company. We were wrong. Her changes started small. New inspirational posters appeared on the walls overnight. Stock photos of diverse teams smiling with captions like, "Teamwork makes the dream work." Emails went out about new wellness initiatives, like a subscription to a meditation app. She started hiring. The new faces were all similar. Young women, fresh out of college, all very cheerful and very loud. They all seemed to know each other, or at least they formed a clique almost instantly. The office dynamic started to shift. The quiet, heads-down atmosphere was replaced by constant chatter, laughter, and inside jokes we weren't privy to. They called themselves the M Squad after Emerson. Then came the first major innovation. An email landed in our inboxes announcing a new anonymous reporting system. Emerson explained in the email that it was a tool to ensure a safe and comfortable work environment for everyone. It allowed any employee to file a completely anonymous complaint against any other employee for anything they deemed inappropriate. No proof required, just a feeling. We all knew what this was. It was a weapon. The first victim was a guy in sales, a bit of a loud talker, but harmless. He got called into Emerson's office because someone filed a complaint that his assertive tone in a sales meeting was a form of verbal aggression that made them feel unsafe. He came out looking pale and confused. After that, a chill settled over the place. People stopped speaking their minds in meetings. Nobody cracked jokes anymore. Every interaction felt like it was being secretly recorded and judged. Next came the mandatory weekly circles of trust. Every Friday afternoon, we had to gather in the big conference room, and a designated facilitator, one of the new hires, would ask us to share our feelings about the work week. It was agony. The new girls would talk endlessly about feeling unsupported or emotionally drained by their workload. The rest of us, the people who actually built, maintained, and shipped the product, just sat there in silence. Darren would stare at his empty coffee mug the entire time. Khari would look out the window. I would try to mentally debug a network issue I was working on. Emerson would sit in the corner, smiling that same placid smile, but you could see her taking notes. She'd occasionally prod the silent ones. She'd ask Darren if he had anything he wanted to unpack about the challenges of the week. He'd just grunt and say, "Things broke, fixed them." You could feel her disapproval. She'd talk about how emotional vulnerability is a strength and how a silent team is a suffering team. The final nail in the coffin was the new performance review system. Our job performance, our actual ability to do the work we were hired for, was now only 70% of our overall score. The other 30% was based on a new metric called cultural contribution. How was it measured? It was completely subjective. Did you actively participate in the circles of trust? Did you join any of the new non-work-related Slack channels, like Feminist Fridays? Did you volunteer for the party planning committee? My code could be flawless, my network uptime could be 99.999%, but if I didn't share my feelings enough, I was officially a subpar employee. This was the system designed to squeeze us out, not with a bang, but with 1,000 little paper cuts. Darren was the first to go. The incident was so stupid, so trivial, that it was almost perfect. One of the new hires, a marketing girl named Kinley, was trying to use the big industrial printer. It was a finicky old beast that Darren kept alive through sheer willpower. It jammed on her, of course. She started complaining loudly that the equipment was patriarchal because it was too complicated. Darren was walking by, heard the commotion, and went over. He didn't even look at her, just opened a side panel, pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, and closed it. She asked him what she should do if it happened again. He grunted, "Just give it a good slap on the side. This old girl likes it rough." He meant the machine. Anyone with a brain would know he meant the machine. The next day, he was in Emerson's office for 2 hours. We couldn't hear what was said, but we could see it through the glass walls. Emerson, calm and composed. Darren, looking tired and just done. Apparently, an anonymous complaint was filed. The comment was described as creating a hostile environment and using violent gendered language. They gave him a formal written warning. A man with 20 years of perfect service at that company, not a single mark on his record. He walked out of her office, went to his own, and started packing his personal effects into a small cardboard box. He didn't make a scene. He just put the written warning on top of his tools, walked over to the CEO's office, left his keys on the secretary's desk, and walked out the front door without a word to anyone. An email went out an hour later from Emerson, announcing Darren's sudden but well-deserved retirement and wishing him well. The next week, the air conditioning in the east wing of the building broke. It was a hot, miserable week. Nobody knew how to fix it. The company that held the service contract quoted us a ridiculous price to even come look at it. Emerson told everyone that a little warmth encourages collaboration. That was when I started updating my resume. The fall of Khari was next, and it was even more insidious. It wasn't about a single comment. It was about his entire existence being an obstacle to progress. Emerson decided that Khari's warehouse system was inefficient and lacked modern accountability. What she meant was that she couldn't understand it, so it had to be bad. She announced a major initiative to digitize and streamline the entire logistics department. She brought in a consulting firm, run by a friend of hers, to sell us a new, state-of-the-art warehouse management system. It was incredibly expensive, a massive software suite that promised to track everything with AI and blockchain and whatever other buzzwords were popular that year. Khari was tasked with overseeing the implementation. He spent a month evaluating it. Then he wrote a detailed 20-page report. He wasn't emotional. It was all pure data. He demonstrated how the new software would be 40% slower than his manual system for our specific type of product. He showed that the subscription costs would erase our profit margin on half our orders. He pointed out that it was incompatible with our existing forklifts and scanning hardware, requiring a complete and costly overhaul. His conclusion was simple: this software was a terrible idea for our business. He presented his findings in a meeting with Emerson and the CEO. I was there because it involved integrating with my servers. Khari laid out his case perfectly, calmly, logically, with undeniable facts. When he was done, Emerson just smiled. She didn't refute a single point. Instead, she said that his report was a good example of legacy thinking, and that he was showing a resistance to change that indicated a lack of team-oriented vision. She told the CEO that clinging to old ways, even if they seemed efficient, was holding the company back from being a dynamic and agile market leader. The CEO, who I don't think understood a word of Khari's report or Emerson's speech, just nodded along. He was terrified of looking like he wasn't on board with innovation. He approved the purchase of the new software on the spot. He looked at Khari and said, "We appreciate your analysis, but we've decided to move in a more forward-thinking direction." Khari just stared at him. It was the first time I'd ever seen him look defeated. He had dedicated his professional life to building a perfect system, and these people had just dismissed it in favor of shiny, expensive garbage because it sounded better in a press release. He didn't quit on the spot like Darren. He was more methodical. He stayed on for another 2 weeks, his official transition period. He sat in on the training sessions for the new software, never saying a word. On his last day, he handed his company laptop and badge to one of the new HR girls. What nobody knew until later was that Khari had dozens of personal notebooks. They were filled with hand-drawn diagrams, flowcharts, and notes that explained the brilliant madness of his warehouse system. They were the only real documentation for it, the keys to the kingdom. He didn't destroy them. He just took them home with him. His expertise, his institutional memory, walked right out the door. The company had paid for his time, not for his soul. After Khari left, it was just me. I was the last man standing from the old guard, outside of a few guys on the factory floor who were part of a different union and harder to get rid of. But in the office, I was an island. The atmosphere was surreal. The M Squad was in charge now. Meetings weren't about solving problems anymore. They were about discussing the feelings that arose from the problems. My ticketing system was overflowing with requests I'd never seen before. Freya in accounting needed help changing the font color in her email signature. Shiloh from marketing couldn't figure out why her laptop speakers were muted. They'd come to my desk not to ask a question, but to declare that the technology was being difficult or unintuitive. They didn't want a solution. They wanted me to validate their frustration. I became less of an IT admin and more of a tech therapist. And through it all, Emerson was thriving. She was getting praise from the CEO for her bold leadership and for transforming the company culture. She was a star. But I could see the cracks forming under the surface, the little things. The shipping department started missing deadlines because the new software was a nightmare. The factory floor had minor equipment failures that would have taken Darren 10 minutes to fix, but now they caused hours of downtime while we waited for an outside technician. The company was still running, but it was like a car that was leaking oil and making a funny noise. You know, it's only a matter of time before it all just stops. I knew I had to get out. It wasn't my company to save. It was no longer a place where competence was valued. It was a social club, and I didn't have the secret handshake. The final straw for me was a security issue. Emerson came to me one afternoon and said she needed full, unrestricted admin access to all company systems. The servers, the firewall, the databases, the backups, everything. I asked her why. She explained that, for full transparency and accountability, HR needed the ability to audit digital conversations and workflows at any time. She wanted the master key to the entire digital kingdom. To give an HR director with zero technical knowledge that level of access is not just a bad idea. It's corporate suicide. A single wrong click, and she could wipe out the entire company's data. I told her, as politely as I could, that this was against every security protocol and industry best practice. I explained the risks involved. She just looked at me with that same cold, patient smile. and she said the words that I knew were coming. "Arthur, it sounds like you're being a bit of a gatekeeper with this information. We're trying to build a culture of trust here, and that requires transparency from everyone, even IT." That was it. That was the moment. My expertise was being framed as an obstacle to her feelings. My professional duty to protect the company was being called gatekeeping. I didn't argue. I had seen what happened to Darren and Khari. I just nodded. I told her I would have to review the security policy and see what the procedure was. That night, I went home and applied to 3 other jobs. I had an interview lined up by the end of the week. I got an offer the following Tuesday. Better pay, better benefits, and a boss who actually understood what a server was. I wrote my letter of resignation, printed it out, and walked into the office ready to finally pull the plug. My 2 weeks' notice was just a formality. I knew they'd be a long 2 weeks, but I had no idea what was about to happen next. I walked in the next morning with my resignation letter in a crisp envelope. It felt like I was disarming a bomb. I went straight to Emerson's office. She was on a video call, smiling and nodding, so I just waited outside. When she was done, she beckoned me in with a gesture that was a little too cheerful. I handed her the envelope. Her smile didn't falter. She opened it, read the single paragraph, and her expression didn't change one bit. It was like I had just handed her a report on office supply levels. She looked up and said she was sorry to see me go, but that she understood the need to pursue new challenges. It was the most rehearsed, disingenuous thing I had ever heard. She told me the company would appreciate me working my final 2 weeks to ensure a smooth transition. I agreed. I wasn't going to burn a bridge, even if the bridge was already on fire. What followed was the most surreal 2 weeks of my professional life. Emerson's idea of a smooth transition was for me to train my replacements. She assigned 2 of her M squad to shadow me, Miriam and Kailani. They showed up at my desk on the first day with brand new notebooks and pens, like they were about to start a fun new class. I started by trying to explain the network architecture. I drew a diagram on the whiteboard showing how the servers, switches, and firewalls all connected. After about 5 minutes, Miriam raised her hand. I thought she had a question about the subnet mask or something. Instead, she asked if there was a way to make the diagram more visually inclusive. I just stared at her. I asked her what that meant. She explained that the diagram was very linear and hierarchical, and that it didn't promote a collaborative network philosophy. I erased the whiteboard and decided to try a different approach. I sat them down at a terminal and showed them the basic command line interface for managing user permissions. Kailani watched me type for a few moments and then said, "The black screen with the green text felt very intimidating and not user-friendly." She asked if there was a GUI with lots of colorful buttons I could use instead. This was the level I was dealing with. They didn't want to learn how the system worked. They wanted the system to change to accommodate their feelings. The rest of the 2 weeks was more of the same. I spent hours writing detailed documentation, step-by-step guides for everything from restarting a failed server to restoring a backup. I printed it all out and put it in a series of thick binders labeled in big, clear letters. I figured even if they couldn't understand the theory, they could at least follow a checklist. When Emerson saw the binders, she gave me a tight, thin smile. She told me that relying on dense text-based documentation was an outdated approach. The new company culture, she explained, was about shared knowledge and intuitive processes, not gatekeeping information in manuals. She was literally criticizing me for doing the exact thing she asked me to do, ensure a smooth transition. On my last day, I tidied up my desk, put all my personal items in a box, and made one last check of the servers. Everything was green, all systems nominal. I left the binders of documentation sitting in the middle of my empty desk, a monument to a lost cause. A few of the new girls, including Miriam and Kailani, organized a little farewell for me. They bought a sheet cake that said, "Good luck on your new adventure," in cheerful pink icing. It was the most awkward 30 minutes of my life. They talked about how much they valued my contributions and how they were excited to build on the foundation I had created. Emerson gave a little speech about how my departure was a sign of a healthy, dynamic company where people were always growing and moving on. She handed me a card signed by all of them. I went home that evening and felt a sense of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. I was out. I was free. Whatever happened next was not my problem. A week later, I was at my new job. It was amazing. My boss was a former network engineer. We talked about hardware specs and kernel panics. My colleagues were professionals. We solved problems. It was bliss. I was scrolling through LinkedIn during my lunch break one day, just out of curiosity, and there it was, a new post from Emerson. It was a long one. It had a professional-looking photo of her and the entire M squad standing in the office, all smiling brightly. The post itself was a victory lap. She announced that she was proud to have created the first fully woman-led operational team in the region. She talked about shattering glass ceilings and building a new corporate paradigm based on empathy, collaboration, and emotional intelligence. She claimed that since the cultural restructuring, team morale and creative output had skyrocketed. She finished with a string of hashtags. Girl Boss, Women in Tech, Diversity and Inclusion, The Future is Female, and Leadership. The post was blowing up. Hundreds of likes, comments from other HR managers and corporate types praising her for being so brave and innovative. I just shook my head and closed the tab. It was a beautiful lie, and it was about to come crashing down. I didn't hear anything for about a month. I was busy with my new role, and honestly, I was trying not to think about the old place. Then, I got a text out of the blue. It was from a woman who still worked there, a quiet lady from the accounting department who I'd always been friendly with. Her text just said, "You got out at the right time. It's a total disaster here. You free to talk?" We got on the phone that evening, and she laid it all out for me. The story she told was one of a slow, creeping, then very sudden collapse. The first domino to fall was one of Darren's machines. It was a big custom-built press that was essential for their main product line. It just stopped working one Monday morning. No warning, no error message, just silence. The factory floor guys, who were only trained to operate it, had no idea what to do. The new head of operations, one of Emerson's hires, came down to look at it. She apparently tried turning it off and on again. Then she called the original manufacturer. The problem was, the manufacturer had gone out of business 5 years ago. Darren had been the only person on Earth who knew its quirks. He'd kept it running with spare parts he sourced from 3 different countries and a healthy dose of what could only be described as mechanical witchcraft. The machine stayed dead. Production on their most profitable product line ground to a complete halt. That was problem number 1. Problem number 2 arrived a week later, courtesy of Khari's replacement software. They were trying to process a massive shipment for their biggest client. The software, which was supposed to be a seamless AI-driven marvel, suddenly glitched. It didn't just crash. It corrupted the entire order database for that client, mixing up part numbers, quantities, and shipping addresses. The warehouse team, now managed by another one of Emerson's friends, had no idea how to fix it. They couldn't revert to a backup because nobody knew how. They couldn't manually sort the order because Khari's simple, elegant physical system had been dismantled and replaced with a chaotic mess of barcodes that now led to nowhere. The shipment was delayed by a week. The client was furious. My friend in accounting said the penalty fees for the delay alone were in the 6 figures. But the grand finale, the real showstopper, was my department. It happened on a Friday afternoon. The perfect time for a catastrophe. Somebody, and to this day nobody knows who, was trying to clean up the Active Directory. Maybe it was Miriam, maybe Kaylani. They were probably trying to implement a more aesthetically pleasing user group structure. They must have clicked the wrong thing, deleted a root permissions group, or a critical system file they didn't understand. At 3:47 p.m., the main server that handled authentication for the entire company went down. And it didn't just go down. It went into a boot loop of death. The consequences were immediate and total. The company website went offline. The internal network vanished. Email stopped working. The VoIP phone system died. Every single computer in the office was suddenly a useless brick, unable to log into the network. The entire digital infrastructure of the company ceased to exist. My friend described the scene. A few screens went black, then a few more. A confused murmur spread through the office. People started asking if the internet was down. Then the slow, creeping horror as they realized it was everything. They were completely cut off from the outside world and from their own data. The M Squad was in full-blown panic. They apparently tried calling me. My old extension was dead, of course. They didn't have my personal number. They tried calling the third-party IT support company we had a low-level contract with. The support guy on the phone asked for the admin password. They didn't know it. He asked them to connect to the server's recovery console. They didn't know what that was. He asked them to read an error code off the physical server's display. They couldn't even figure out how to get into the locked server room. The binder I had left, the one with the big friendly letters on it that said, "Emergency Server Recovery," was apparently being used as a monitor stand on someone's desk. The entire office descended into chaos, and at the center of it all was Emerson. My friend said she just locked herself in her glass office. Everyone could see her. She was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, screaming into her cell phone. The CEO was calling her. The angry client was calling her. The heads of other departments were banging on her door. And what was her highly trained, empathetic, collaborative team doing? My friend forwarded me a few of the internal emails they managed to send each other using their personal phones. Kinley sent a company-wide message suggesting they all take a moment to practice mindfulness and acknowledge the collective trauma of the situation. Shiloh was asking if they were still expected to complete their timesheets for the day. Miriam was trying to organize a Zoom meeting to debrief on the communication breakdown and strategize a more emotionally resilient workflow for the future. They were completely, utterly useless. They were a team built to manage feelings, and when faced with a reality that didn't care about their feelings, they completely shattered. Emerson was left alone, drowning in the consequences of her own decisions. She had systematically removed every person who knew how to fix things, and now things were broken beyond repair. She had built her perfect world, and she was the only one left to be crushed by it. The company never really recovered. They had to hire an emergency team of freelance IT consultants who charged them an astronomical fee to come in and rebuild the servers from scratch. It took them a week just to get basic email functioning again. They lost their biggest client. Several others followed. The reputation of the company was in tatters. My friend told me that Emerson was let go about a month after the crash. There was no big announcement. Her name was just gone from the company directory one day. Her triumphant LinkedIn post was deleted. I looked her up recently. Her profile now says she's a freelance DEI consultant and thought leader, currently open to new opportunities. The company is still around, but it's a shadow of its former self. They had massive layoffs. My friend from accounting managed to hang on, but she's looking for a new job. A couple of months ago, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Khari. He said he and Darren were going to grab a beer and wanted to know if I was free. I met them at a quiet old bar near our former workplace. It was the first time I'd seen either of them since they left. Darren looked less tired. Khari was smiling more. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about what happened. We didn't need to. We knew. We talked about our new jobs, about our families, about nothing in particular. It was just comfortable. A quiet understanding between three guys who had seen the same train wreck up close. As we were getting ready to leave, Darren took a final sip of his beer and looked at me. He said, "You know, the funny thing is, that old press really did like it when you gave it a good slap." We all just started laughing. It wasn't a bitter laugh. It was just freeing. We had been right, and we had survived.